Dear God, help us to learn something from the characters in this story as they decided to follow you instead of follow the king and his wishes. Help us to be able to be like Daniel and his friends as they followed your wishes and not Nebuchadnezzar's wishes, and help us
Excuse me.
learn something from it. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. So I decided to do a little review before we continue. So we talked about faith last week, right, Ty? And faith is trusting in God, believing that He loves us, and knowing what's best for our good. And so, will Ty read the second paragraph there on this page?
This prophecy of Daniel is an introductory lesson. It prepares us for the even more stupendous predictions that come later. As we observe its fulfillment in international affairs over the centuries, our minds are open to understanding other outstanding prophecies in Daniel and Revelation that deal with vital developments in the Christian church. And we are prepared for still other reassuring predictions about the wonderful things Jesus is doing for us right now. Arranging the prophecies in order, from simple to complex and from public to personal, is another evidence of how much God cares for us.
Okay. So we have a key text today, and I'll read it myself. It's from Daniel 3:28. That was on the lesson. It reads, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any God except their God."
Mm.
And we already know that this was said by King Nebuchadnezzar. So before we begin, I'd like to say that I'm typing something in chat, and it's a code. So I know that some of you guys don't really want to, speak, right? And so I've decided that. Let me see the word. I might do something where you guys will be able to ask me questions, and I can answer these questions for you.
Okay.
See, sorry. And so instead of having to say something, if you don't feel comfortable talking, I have this question thing. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a little while, and I will chat to you the code for it. And if you feel like you don't want to, say something or literally talk, then you don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm typing the code in. Okay, so do you feel more comfortable if I tell it to you, or do you want me to type it in chat?
Probably both, if you don't mind, for those who may come in later.
Okay, sure. I'll type it in chat.
While you're typing, Timothy, I just wanted to say good morning to Safari, Ruth, and Joy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Did you all start school this week?
No.
Oh, okay. That's right. Monday, right, Alpha?
It's gonna be I think, yeah, August 24th.
Oh, the 24th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's next Monday. Not this upcoming Monday, but next Monday. Okay, so you all still have another week. To Shayla, when are you all starting? Just type it in the chat.
That's what I'm doing. Oh.
I want to say we start Monday.
Oh, okay. I know everybody is starting at different times.
Okay, so I typed in the thing. You can just type it in your search bar, and then it will say, ask Timothy. It will say, ask a question, and it says slides Q&A or question and answer, and it will say choose your kingdom. So you just ask me a question, and I'll be able to answer it. That's if you don't feel like talking.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just gonna still try it out. I always feel like talking, but I'm gonna still try it out though.
Okay, so I won't be sharing my screen that often so I can read your questions, but for some things I will. So we shall continue. And tell me if you have any problems. So I'll share my screen for this little tidbit on the history or the introduction. In the closing periods of Earth's history, the Lord will work mightily. He who walked with the Hebrews in the fiery furnace will be with his followers wherever they are. His abiding presence will comfort and sustain. Satan, with all the host of evil, cannot destroy the weakest of God's saints. Angels that excel in strength will protect them, and in their behalf, Jehovah will reveal himself, able to save to the utmost those who have put their trust in him. So, kind of like last week, we know that if you have faith in him, God will be able to protect you whatever you do. And he'll be able to help you so that he will be able to assist you so that whenever you are feeling in trouble, you know that you have Jesus on your side. So that's kind of like it's kind of like a point in my story here. And we know that Satan and all his host of angels cannot destroy the weakest of saints. And that will be displayed later in the story when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get thrown in the fiery furnace. Satan might try to make them nervous or scared or feel like disobeying him. But we already know that Satan cannot destroy only the weakest of angels. Okay. Anyone have any comments on the same passage?
Oh, we couldn't see the passage because you weren't sharing it, but the place where you wanted us to go, it says we need permission.
Oh yeah, I just realized something. Yeah, okay. I'm accepting. So I come from this different administration. I'm accepting questions from anyone now. So you can try again now.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions and comments on?
Can you show the paragraph or repeat it again one more time?
Sorry for taking so long.
It's okay. I love that you're doing something new. This is awesome. I'm actually typing in my question right now.
Okay. So the paragraph is right there.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I like this. I heard a little bit of what you were saying. I was trying not to Google Slides at the same time. But I like this because actually last week, Mr. Bailey and I shared a message on Change Fellowship on this very story, on what Christ can do when we're going through the fire. And Satan, when we're with Christ, when we're with Jesus, nothing can overcome us. His strength is real. His angels are real. He He is able to save us no matter what. That's why it's important for us to follow what is right. And this is a perfect connection or linked in the chain to last week's lesson, where Ty was getting us to really think about our faith and how deep our faith goes, because it's our faith that'll allow us to enter into this kind of experience, the experience that will let us see the power of God and rescue us during a time that is very dangerous. So,
yes. So, we know that when you trust in God, it's like a faith exercise that helps you to strengthen your faith in Him and grow with faith, so that you're able to it's like going to the gym and working out. You work in your faith with Jesus, and before you know it, you will be able to trust Him in the situations that you have with Him, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. Okay. So, I have a question. I will share my screen so you can read it while I read it, but I'd like to see all your faces when you answer this. Yeah. Okay. So, while I'm getting my screen shared, the questions show. This is the question. It's a question on, it's like which would impact you more? Basically, the number of friends around you, are you just going to fall into their trap more if there are a lot more people with you, are you going to
follow the majority?
Yeah, you're going to follow the majority, or are you going to just,
stand out alone?
Stand out alone and follow God's will. So, while I'm getting this up here, I'm going to ask you that question. Which are you going to do? Are you going to follow? Or are you going to go with what is right and not follow the crowd? So, it's kind of what I'm asking you right now. You're going to do what's right, you're going to follow the crowd.
Well, I do what's right, so
So in this one particular section, it says, when a small group of close friends, would it be relatively easy for me to do what's right, even if they didn't?
And I think everyone should, go ahead. Go ahead, sweetie.
Maybe a 3 or 2.
3, 2?
Oh, 3.
This is 1 to 10. This is 1 to 10.
Oh,
the screen says 1 to 5.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah. I'm reading it.
I think between a 3 and a 4.
3 and a 4?
Yeah.
I think it's also too important for...
Go ahead. Sorry.
When it says close friends, because that makes it even harder. If you're just in a group,
it's not going to hurt you if you make them sad or something. But this is a group of close friends who want to do something wrong.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
If you were in a large group with none of my friends, would it be difficult for me to do what I thought was right if anyone else didn't think the same way? Me? No. I'm in a large group of people who I really have no idea who they are. If I make them disappointed, it's not going to make me sad that I've just disappointed my best friends or something, because I almost don't know them at all. So it's easier to follow His will when you're with people you don't know. So Alpha's saying number 5, a 5. So it's easier, number 5 to 1, 5, to do what God says than to follow the crowd. Now, let's move on.
Yeah.
I'm fine doing whatever the group I am. I'm fine doing whatever the group I am with thinks is best, as long as they are Christians. So sometimes people think, they're Christians. Whatever they do is right. But everyone make mistakes, and when you know something is wrong, you can stand up for what you believe in. How hard would it be if the group you're with is Christians, or are Christians, and they're doing something that is not right, whatever they're doing? Would you do it with them just because they're Christians and they say, okay, they're Christians, if it's right or wrong, doesn't matter because they're Christians? Would it be harder or easier?
Well, if you're a Christian, it would be probably really easy because you can tell if they're doing right or wrong because you come from their point of view. But if you're not a Christian, you don't know what Christians' guidelines are, so you don't know what they're going by. So whatever they're going by, you just believe them because their guidelines, whatever their guidelines say is okay, for them it's okay. And if I want to join them, I have to go along with their guidelines. So It would be easier if you were a real Christian than if you were just a person who hasn't known Christianity but is with Christian friends.
So I'm seeing a lot more of a 3 in the middle with Christian friends. I'm seeing a lot more 3. So we had 5 earlier. I'm seeing a lot more 3 when you're with Christian friends. Now, Daniel and his friends, or Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were not with Daniel. They were alone in the middle of a crowd in front of a giant statue. We will continue on.
Oh, Alpha has something to say.
Sure.
I said 3 because yes, people may be Christians, but I know a lot of people say they're Christians, but they don't act like it. So the group I'm with, they could be Christian, but they don't have the same views as me. And so I say 3 because it's like they may have the same views as me and we're on the same path, or they may not, and they're totally something different than from what I thought of.
That's true.
Okay. So we're getting a general idea of how much faith it actually took for Daniel for his 3 friends to stand up for what they believe in. So now we're going to see what's going on and what led up to the arrangement in which they were put into the fiery furnace. So I'm back to sharing my screen. So, Ruth, will you read this first half up to blazing furnace?
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. Whoever does not fall down in worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace."
Okay. So you can imagine how Daniel and his friends felt. How their hearts skipped a beat almost, right? No way. They're thinking, uh-oh. We could just, my dad would say they could have just, bent down and pretended to tie their shoes instead of bowing, or something. But instead, they chose to do what's right. So, Joy, will you read the last section?
Yeah. Okay. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. "Your Majesty has issued a decree, but there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to your majesty. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you have not served my gods or worshipped the image of gold I have set up?"
Okay, so last time we know that I have noticed that the king, every time something happens that glorifies God, he says, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." And then I read later in the book, or the Bible, and he's doing something else. Praise God when Daniel revealed a dream. Then he goes and makes a statue that's similar to the one in the dream, except it's all gold to represent him. It was not less than a few moments ago that he was like praising God. Now he's worshiping himself, So that is...
But isn't that like what we go through as Christians?
Yes.
It's like God, we have faith in God. He comes through for us. We are so grateful. We testify. But then some temptation comes in and we fall again. Mm-hmm. And God is right there, merciful, to help us see what is true. He gives us an opportunity to start again, and we start again and we fall again. Mm-hmm. So it's our experience too.
Okay, so I'll read this section here because I have something to say in this area. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown away into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent that the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these three men fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there three men that we tied up and threw in the fire? Look, I see four walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the fourth looks like the Son of God." So, that would have been enough of you could say, a little reminder of what God has done to Nebuchadnezzar in the past. As you see, the three men that he's placed in the fiery furnace are dead, and they didn't go in. And Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in, and they're not hurt. King Nebuchadnezzar realizes this, and now we know he's going to glorify God. But as we know the story already, we know that it takes a long time to come back to him. Or, like for Nebuchadnezzar, it took a long time for him to humble. And so, like, every time he made a mistake and he fell down, God would show him something, help him in his ways, and he would come back. But it's kind of the same here with us. We're not always perfect. Now we're going to figure. So we know that Daniel kind of copied. We know that King Nebuchadnezzar kind of copied the dream, but he changed its meaning by changing the way that the statue was made. Mm-hmm. So the first question in my out of the story question is going to be, whose original idea was the image in the story?
It was Nebuchadnezzar's. Actually,
it was God's idea.
Whose original idea was the image? Oh, I thought you were talking about the golden image.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Now, to be honest, you could say Nebuchadnezzar was inspired by the image in his dream. to make this.
Okay, so the original idea was the image in this story. The image in this story is a golden image.
No, the original idea for the image in this story was Nebuchadnezzar's idea for the gold image.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
But he got the inspiration for this gold image from the dream in which he learned that his kingdom would not last forever.
Yes.
Now, if he makes a gold image, it shows that he's still not humble in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And you can realize how incredible the faith of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was, because they got thrown into a fiery furnace that killed the strongest man in his army, and they still believed in God, and God rewarded them. Compare the image from the dream in chapter 2 to the image in this passage. What are the similarities and what are the differences? I haven't heard from Safari, Alpha, Faith.
The similarities would be that it's the same thing. It's just the differences would be that he created it so. Well, the similarities is it's the same thing, but then the differences is he not only changed the color, but he changed the meaning behind the statue. Because in the first one, it was a meaning that his kingdom would last forever. But in this one, it's to where his kingdom will last forever.
I agree with Ty. I think that like in his vision, he saw that Babylon would only last for like a certain amount of time, and he made that statue saying, "No, my kingdom will last forever. It will be the most powerful," because that gold stood for that Babylon would be like the best out of all of those. It wouldn't be like the Romans like having like such a powerful force, but it would be like the richest and like just the like
most valuable.
Yeah, the most valuable out of all of them. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to believe that. He said, "My kingdom will be the most valuable and will be gold forever. It doesn't matter what I don't care about the Persians, about the Greeks, about the Romans. No other kingdom will be as powerful as the Babylonians." So that's what he wanted to say.
And also,
go ahead.
And also, I think Nebuchadnezzar forgot that he might have deleted all those other kingdoms, but he hasn't deleted the rock that destroys the image. Mm-hmm. So though in his mind and in the image, he destroyed every other kingdom there else could be, he didn't destroy the rock that took away all those other kingdoms. So as long as that rock is still there will still be the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, then the divided kingdom, and then finally Jesus will come. So as long as he didn't take the rock away, which he can't change anything. He might change it in his mind and in the people's eyes, but he never exactly changes the prophecy.
That leads me to question 3. You can imagine how much faith it took when the 3 people, or the 3 boys, Hebrew youth, said, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." So, were they being insubordinate? Alpha?
Okay. Okay. I don't think, well, in my opinion, I don't think that they were being insubordinate, because I wouldn't see a reason why they would have to defend themselves. They only serve one God. And so I don't know. I think I'm trying to find the right words.
I think you can respectfully disobey.
Yes, because what the king wanted them to do was like since the beginning of the story, what the king wanted for them to do was wrong, and for them to listen to the king, like they know that God had the right intentions for them, and they knew what God was doing, and so I don't see why they would have to explain themselves to the king.
Good. That is right. You can imagine, right, all of you, you can imagine how angry the king got. You know? They were not giving him a chance. Like, he was giving them a second chance to worship this gold image, and they said, we're not going to. So you might as well not do it. So that is extreme faith. I mean, it took more faith. I mean, it would have been easier for them at least to go back and just bow down. And even if they had not, at least have another chance away from everyone to just stand there and get away or something, you know. Instead, they decided to say, we're not even going to go back there. So, like, you can go ahead and burn us. I was thinking about this. I was thinking extreme faith. I listened to something. In the fiery furnace, the four of them walking around in there, I just had this funny thought. You know, they're singing, give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning, burning, burning. You can just imagine how, you know, they're happy that Jesus has saved them because of their faith in him. And so he can work mightily. As in the first slide, in our introduction, we read that the Lord in the end times will work mightily. Even though this is in the end times, he was still working mightily.
Well, I think their amazement or their faith was when they were being tied up, and right there before they even made it into the flames, soldiers died as they were being thrown in. So it's just like, it's like being on cloud nine. It's like you're in something, but you're not being touched by it. It's a bubble. You know, it's like being in a bubble where everything is happening around you, but you're not experiencing it. And it's something that I believe, like you just said at the beginning, you brought out the point. It's something we all can experience, but will our faith allow us to get there, to ever experience something of that degree?
Yes. When is it necessary to resist prevailing influences in society? What influences should you resist? So, this question can apply to anyone. It does not have to be a king or a president. It could just be the best kid in your class, or just another influencing person in society who wants you to do something wrong. And what influences in that area of society would you resist? Our school is a Christian school, so like for me, the area that relates most is the Christian group area. Back here. So it's kind of like this. With prevailing influence in societies, when these people are doing what is not right, should you resist them? Or should you just follow their rule? It's kind of like when is it necessary to resist? You know, there's a time when you should be telling them this is not right. You know? But then there's a time when you should walk away too.
Can I pose a question that I think can really cause everyone to really think? There are two things happening in our country right now that makes this question very, very hard to answer because of positions that people are in. The first question is, as a teacher, and many teachers across the country are against virtual learning. Why? Because they see their students in their homes over the computer alone. So they're kindergartners, first graders, young children left alone because their parents have to work. And the parents have told them, stay in front of the computer, you know, just listen to your teacher. Well, for a teacher to have to agree to something like that, it puts them in a very, very tough spot. They want that child to learn. They understand that the parent has to work, but this is not a good situation for that child. It's not safe for that child. And the parent, the teacher is not actually being effective in teaching them because the child is having to be on their own to pay attention. That's a very tough spot that a lot of teachers are in right now. And some teachers are actually leaving the teaching profession because of this controversy. They want to do what's right, but prevailing influences are causing them to do or requiring them to do something that goes against what they believe is right. So, any thoughts on that? According to your question, especially with churches opening and closing, that's another controversy. Some people say we shouldn't listen to the government. We should go ahead and open our doors and be protective in our churches. And some are saying, no, the government say it's not safe for us to be around in groups, so we need to keep our church doors closed. These are controversial things. Like Alpha was saying, like you were saying, in the midst of Christians, people have different views. Which way do you follow? Which way is right? That really tests your faith. Does anybody have any comments on that? How do you all feel about returning to church right now?
Well, I want to return because...
Well, you actually started school, so that kind of makes it harder. It's like you're in school, so why not be in church? So that kind of, So
especially since like a lot of our school does interact with church too. So like we do some things out at church. It also interacts with the way because sometimes we go on field trips,
right?
In which we sing songs at different places and stuff like that. And so that does cause some problems. So like...
Go ahead. But we're Christians, Timothy. We're a part of the same group, but you got people thinking differently. Well, how do you know which way to go? It's easy when you say, okay, God is with me, I'm going to go in this fire. That's not easy, but we have a story to help us to believe that. I don't think anybody would just want to just be thrown into the fire. It will take faith. But this is an intellectual test. It's a test of the mind. Like, how do I know if I'm being presumptuous or if I'm being faithful in going forward? Nobody? I saw some people shaking their heads when it said coming back to church. Some people said no.
Well, I love this Sabbath school, but I do want to go somewhere and, seeing people I haven't seen in a while at church and being able to, interact. Well, not the same way, but at least see them face to face or, just go to church and
come together.
Yeah.
Safari, you're saying something?
Yeah, I would like to go back to church. I don't know. It's just staying at home all the time. I don't want to do this anymore. At first, like that first week, I was like, oh, I kind of like this. I don't want to go to school and all this. Then it started to be like, and now I don't, like, all the days are starting to blend together and
it's tough. Oh, go ahead, Alpha.
I said I want to go back to church like really bad, but our church is still closed. I don't know if it's because of our church making its own choice or it's because of the conference that we're in. But I see other churches opening up, and I'm like, oh, why can't we open up? And then I think about because we have a lot of elderly people at our church, and based on the coronavirus, elderly people are easier to catch the COVID. And so I was like, oh, well, that makes more sense. But I kind of wish they would still open up, but in a safe environment.
Yeah. So Timothy, do you see that as a controversy with number 4? I mean, this is what's coming to my mind. Do resisting prevailing influences? What influences should you resist? Like, should we resist the conference or the church leaders, or should we comply? You know.
Well, that brings me back to remembering something where Jesus is telling Pilate, when Pilate said, Jesus is telling Pilate, you have the authority over me because God gave it to you. And if God gave the authority to the conference to make these decisions for our good, then it is good that we follow their influences.
Okay.
Yes. Question number 5.
Very political response.
What did the test of the furnace prove in the end? So we know that in the end, Jesus was there with them in the furnace, and he protected them from the furnace because of their faith. Who was in control of what went on there? Ty, Shayla, Ruth, Joy.
God was in control because when they were thrown into the fire, you could say it's almost like God almost transformed the fire from an actual fire to just paper flames. Like, so though they see the fire, though they see the real fire when they were thrown in, God, he changed the way the fire worked and moved so that they wouldn't get burned.
Mm-hmm. So that brings me here. Has your faith ever been tested in the furnace of troubles and difficulties? Have you relied on God to carry you through that time of testing? Anyone? You don't have to say it out loud if you don't want to.
Well, one thing I noticed is that when you're going through the furnace, the one thing you need to go through the furnace is faith. And so in this, you have to trust God. So when it says, have you ever relied on God to carry you through the time of testing? To get all the other things that, like, if you want success, you have to go through. But let's say, okay, so you have to go through the fire. But to get through the fire and get success, you have to have faith. So really, when it says, have your faith been tested in the furnace of troubles and difficulties, to go in, you have to have faith. And to get out, you have to have faith. So you have to have a good measure of faith, enough to be able to go through the furnace and also to be able to come out. Because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had to have faith to go in the furnace. They had to have faith that God would protect them in the furnace, but they also had to have faith in the furnace that God would not burn them in the furnace. So you need faith. And then also, once they're out of the furnace, that gives them more faith for the next time they need faith to go into another furnace. So really, it's just a cycle of God gives you a measure of faith that you need. You have to use that faith wisely to get more faith. And as you get more and more faith, then God blesses you more and more.
Anyone else? Okay. So, I'm going to read this. As through Jesus we enter into rest. Heaven begins here. We respond to his invitation. Come learn of me. And thus coming, we begin the life eternal. Heaven is a ceaseless approaching to God through Christ. The longer we are in heaven of bliss, the more and still more of glory will be open to us. And the more we know God, the more intense will be our happiness. As we walk with Jesus in this life, we may be filled with his love, satisfied with his presence. All that human nature can bear, we may receive here. So, in this paragraph, what is she saying? She's saying that, first of all, I'm going to cut this down a little bit. We're going to see, there's some things in here you might not know what they are. What would the heaven of bliss represent? Safari, with Bailey.
Oh, I think it's fine.
Alpha, Faith. I'm just calling on more people.
But what I noticed about that is, so basically, once we are, we can have our own relationship with God. Once we're not babies anymore and we don't have to trust our parents to give us everything. That's when God gives us our first, you could say, our first packet. And then our first packet only includes one thing, and that is faith. So what you have to do is that you have to use that packet wisely so that when God puts you in the furnace, you have to have faith that when God is putting you in the furnace, you have to have faith that God will protect you. And then when you're in the furnace, you have to have faith that God will not have you burn, let's say burn. And in that time, you're using up that packet of faith you got. And then once you've used it up to the point where it seems that you have none, then that's when that's when you pass the test, and then God gives you another bigger measure of faith, and the cycle continues and continues. And like it says, the longer we are in the heaven of bliss, the more and still more of the glory will be open unto us. The more and more we get tested, and the more and more faith we get, the more and more blessings we get, and the more and more we grow closer to God. So it's really a cycle of faith. The whole human life is a cycle of faith in God.
Okay, so then I'd like to ask you a question, Ty. What happens if you're not done with this packet of faith and it starts to weaken?
Did you want Ty to answer that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I would say that it's kind of like when you get your first packet of faith and then it starts to weaken. It's kind of like God lets it weaken more and more and more. And once it weakens to a certain point, that's when you pass. Because if God's going to give you faith, and you're just going to have that faith the whole time. You're not using your faith, you're keeping it. So God has to make you dwindle your faith so you can get more faith. So it's like you're in a NASCAR race and you're driving the final lap. You have just less than enough. You have barely more than enough to get to the pit stop. that last pit stop you need. So you're driving there, and then you notice that you don't have enough. You need to have faith that you can drive on to that pit stop. You need to have faith that you will get to that pit stop, and that's when God will give you the gas you need to get to that pit stop so you can win. It's not like, because if you try and shortcut, like, let's say you have to take 2 laps every pit stop, and you notice you need gas, so you're deciding to go in your pit stop 1 lap early. Then you're kind of taking a shortcut, so then it takes even longer to get to the next packet. But if you trust God and you go through till you truly almost believe that to where you truly almost believe that you will not have gas, that's when God, though your gas has run out, he lets your car slide into the pit stop so you can win. So it's more like, to get to the next packet, your faith has to dwindle. And that's the way to basically to everlasting life. Your packet has to keep on dwindling and dwindling and dwindling and dwindling till you get to that final packet and you dwindle to the point to where you can get eternal life.
I have a question on that concept. But what about Enoch? Enoch's life, he walked with the Lord, and he walked with the Lord so well and so close that the Lord took him and brought him to where he lives. With that thought, it is possible to accept his invitation, as this paragraph is saying, learn of him and always stay in that place of heavenly bliss. Always stay in a place where Jesus is with you. It is possible for any human who accepts this invitation to be so close to Christ that they don't run out, that they just experience.
Feeling. You just keep sustaining on.
Yeah, that's what this paragraph is saying. As we walk with Jesus in this life, we'll be filled with his love, satisfied with his presence. And I believe that's how Daniel lived. That's how Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah lived. Their faith never dwindled. But I see where Ty is talking about, because that's describing us. My faith dwindles, and God gives me just enough so I can make it to the next thing. And when I'm weak, he comes in and he gives me more gas. He does what he needs to do. I cannot say I'm a Daniel right now. I cannot say I am. But is it possible? Yes, it is possible. I believe that with all my heart. I'm just not experiencing it right now in my life. But I want to get there. I want to be there.
And also, I would say the reason why Enoch had probably what we could say an easier time is because in all his time, instead of just thinking that I won't make it, he said in his mind, I will make it. I know God will get me through. So it was easier for him because he already had enough trust. He used the trust God gave him. And because of that, he was able to have an easier time on him because he already knew God was going to get him through. So God didn't have to get him to trust that he would get him through. He just had to say, okay, I'll give you, and because you already trust me enough, because you already know I'm going to get you through, I don't need to give you lessons on getting you through. I just need to get you through. I don't need to teach you that I'm going to get you through. God just had to say, I will get you through. Instead of having to teach Enoch, because he already knew God was going to get him through, God just had to get him.
So, any questions, comments, or thoughts? Last remarks. I'm going to give you a thought that we've read in this story on how and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, displayed amount of faith. You can answer this in the question and answer if you don't want anyone to see it, or you don't have to at all. But do you think you're at that level from 1 to 10 of faith that you can be like Enoch, or at least be at a level of faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got to?
Well, I would say that God has already given us the resources to have a level 10 in faith. Mm-hmm. It's just that we don't use the resources right, or it's really just our attitude. Because we don't think that God will do it, he's like, maybe I won't do it. But if we know God will do it, then he will do it, because we know, because when you know God is going to do it, he doesn't have any reason to disappoint you. So he lets you through. And it's to where, like, he gives you everything you need. It's just your attitude that needs working on. Because really what happens is when you use that faith, the next packet, so let's say this. On your first packet, you get faith. Once you pass to the next packet, you get faith and love. And then you go on and on, adding more faith and more of the fruit of the Spirit. And as you get more and more, it gets harder and harder to where, till you're kind of at that level where you're kind of at that statue, that giant 60-cubit statue, to where it's either you choose to bow down to that statue. The last test is to where you either choose to bow down to that statue, or you choose to burn.
Walk through the fire.
Yeah, so you just add on, really, God gives you faith, and then he gives you a statue. So he gives you faith, and then he puts the statue, and then he puts the furnace. And you have to walk, and once you get to the crossway, that goes one to the statue and one to the furnace, you have to choose, will I use the resources right, or will I just waste the resources? Because once you go to the statue, the resources, they basically just disappear, because you don't need the resources you don't need the resources to pass the statue. All you need to do is go and bow, and you're done. You don't need faith to go and bow down to a statue of another god. So really, in the whole choose your kingdom, it's to where every time God gives you faith, and then every time you have to come to that crossroad where you have to choose your kingdom, to where you have to choose whether I'm going to use this packet that God has given me, or I'm just going to drop it off here and say, when I'm done worshiping this statue, I'll come back and get it. So really, the whole lesson is kind of tying around when God gives you stuff, he puts that crossroad in your life, and you really just have to choose, will I trust God, or will I choose the other path? Will I trust God and continue with the packet that God has given me, or will I drop my packet at the crossroad, drop it at Satan's feet, and just go along with what Satan wants me to do?
So where's your faith, Ty? What number is your faith? Your Ty O'Year's faith.
Well, I would say I could work on it more. I would say maybe a 3 or 4 or 5. I know for a matter of fact it's not more than 5. But if you really work, I could probably actually get my faith a 10, from a 5 to a 10 in a week or something. Because God, like I said earlier, God gives you everything you need to get a 10. God gives you everything you need to get that A+ on the history pop quiz. It's just how you use it. It's just when you get to that crossroad, do you either continue using that or you just drop it off?
Sure.
Yes. Well, thank you for your comment, Ty. I agree very much. I think that faith is something very important. If it's used the right way, it's rewarded. I read something where faith also has to be used the right way, if you understand what I mean. You know, I trust God, He will help me with this situation, right? But there is crazy faith, you know, like I trust God, He'll save me after I jump off the Empire State Building. No, you know, you have to use it the right way, you know. So, you know, faith is a very important substance that you can use, and when Jesus comes, you'll be very happy when He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So, let us pray. Dear Father, help us as we go throughout our week. Help us to have faith beyond 10 and to be able to grow in your example. Help us to be able to trust in you even when things seem difficult. Help us to trust in you whenever it seems like we're going to have to walk through the fire. Help us to be able to strengthen, help us to strengthen, and help us to be able to do what is right, no matter what influences around us. In Jesus' name, amen.